Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. What a lovely turnout, especially for a long weekend. Beginning of this year, end of last year, where's Maz? Oh, there she is at the back. So Maz sent me this list of all these beautiful words that I could choose from for the year. A little sneak peek behind the scenes there of how Creative Mornings works. And this was the one that I was like, this one, perspective. Little fun thing that Gustavo actually only brought to my attention the other day was that, so my business is called 28 Thursdays, and today is Thursday the 28th. It's meant to be. So this is all very exciting. Anyway, so perspectives. And there's multiple different perspectives you can take on perspectives. The one I have chosen to take is the perspectives that I use when I've got a big, gross, messy life thing. One of these ones. So take a big deep breath and think about a big, disgusting life thing, a decision you've got to make. The ones that make you feel like this in your stomach. You wake up in the morning, you're like, a new day. You're like, oh no, the thing. The thing still exists. I still have to make that decision about the thing. This thing is still floating around in my body, in the world. It may be a decision. It might be something different you've got to do. So I've got 8 top tips. These are things that have worked for me. Do not take this as medical advice. Consult your doctor, blah, blah, blah. All right, read the small print. So there's 8 different ways I think about big life things and different perspectives on them that help me kind of move through those big life things. The first kind of little category is looking at it from above. And the 2 ways I look at it from above, and there's no burying the lead here. This next one is the one that I use probably the most when I'm making a big decision or thinking about something big and horrible, is that everything is reversible. Every big decision, other than life and death, or being born and dying, is reversible. In 2014, so this year is my 10-year Oziversary from the UK. I think I've still got it. This year, so when I left, or when I was starting telling people I was going to leave, move to Australia, people were like, what if you don't like it? And I was like, I will come back. Or I will go somewhere else. Like, this is not, it was a big decision, sure, absolutely. It was leaving the country, it sold stuff, there's all the stuff you've got to do. But it was reversible. And I think we forget this. I was talking to someone just the other day who was telling me about one of their friends who's just started this new relationship, and they've moved in together really quickly, and they were telling me how for some people, some of their friends are like, oh, what if you don't like each other? What if it turns out not to be a good decision? And she's like, I'll move back out. Like, that's not a permanent thing. And I think when we remember that most of the decisions we make are not permanent things, sorry, you've got a baby, that's fairly permanent, I'm afraid. Thank you for illustrating my point beautifully. Most of those decisions we make are not permanent, and it helps us hold it a bit lighter and helps us actually think about, okay, cool, this is not something that maybe is as big a thing as I need to. So everything is reversible. Number 2 is that life is short, but careers are long. I love thinking about this one so much when I think about work things. And when I talk to people sometimes who ask me advice about career stuff or work stuff, which, every so often will happen, we've got time to fuck about and find out with work stuff. Because looking around the room, we're all nice young people. None of us are retiring. Sorry. Like, none of us. None of us are retiring. So what that means is we're probably going to be working for a lot longer. And what that means is we can have multiple different careers. We can have those moments where we're like, you know what, this year I'm going to retrain in something else. I'm going to play with photography this year. I'm going to do this other thing. I'm going to take this contract, which maybe isn't what I want to do forever, but it's probably not going to put me back, because the idea of being put back is sort of made up. And I think those are the sort of, there's a few nods there. There's a few nods, nice. Because I think when we start telling ourselves about being behind or being put backwards and things like that, we kind of create this false kind of narrative. And spoiler alert, it's all made up. All of that stuff, the being behind, the milestones, the where you need to be, and all of these different things, all made up. All made up. So therefore, we don't have to continue with it. We can make up our own. We can then remake up a different path and a different timeline. And maybe that timeline's a bit longer. So life is short, but careers are long. Okay. Being a futurist, the other way I like to look at big decisions and big life things, big gross life things, is from the future. So looking back on it. In Futures, a little Futures 101 here, we call this backcasting. So rather than standing in the present and looking forward to the future thing and being like, oh, I don't know how to get there, that feels really hard, the bit in between feels massively overwhelming, I'm going to avoid that and go back to bed. We start from the future. and we look back and we go, that's how I got here. So rather than looking forwards and feeling overwhelmed, we look back and feel kind of satisfied, and that we did the thing, we made the decision, we took that step. And that's a lot less overwhelming. So we've got that backcasting if you do that in a futures way. But the way I think about looking at it from the future is, what will you regret more when you're 80? And in 2010, a couple of friends of mine were like, Steph, we're planning this big road trip, 5-week trip from the west coast of the US to the east coast of the US. Do you want to come with us? And I thought, I was 23, it was my first kind of big trip, and I was like, I don't know, sounds kind of scary. And they were like, okay, are you coming? And this was the question that kind of made me make the decision. When I'm 80, what stories do I want to be boring the pants off people that I'm still friends with, or in the old people's home, or whatever it is? What stories do I want to be boring them with? Is it the story of when I went to the US and did a little road trip across the country with my 2 really good friends? Or is it when I spent 5 weeks sitting at home while my friends went and did the fun thing? It's probably the former one. And it was the former one, and that was amazing. And that was the thing, that was the trip that then made me go and take more trips on my own. The year after, I actually came to Australia for 3 weeks. I volunteered in a koala sanctuary for 2 weeks in Brisbane. It was the best time of my life. And that was the thing that then got me here, like a few years later. So what will you regret more when you're 80? Is it doing the thing or not doing the thing? And so many of the decisions I've made, and taking this perspective, has been the thing that has been the unlock, and the thing that has then made me go, yeah, this is the story I want to be telling. This is the story I want to be telling. / boring people with still at that time. The other one is a bit of a kind of, I suppose, a weird one, which is, how will this thing be irrelevant? So when I'm stuck in the feelings, or I'm making a big decision, or it feels really big and all-encompassing, I often think about, well, at what point in the future and how far in the future might this feeling, this thing, this decision kind of be irrelevant, and maybe feel a lot smaller than it is feeling right now? So this is something I think about quite often. And there's again, this sort of lightness that comes when we get to kind of think about the thing being maybe less of a thing. This is one of my favorite newer ones that I've added to my repertoire of perspectives on big, horrible life things, is, what might this be the unlock to? And in particularly, the question of, or at least like a good chapter in your memoir. So this is my friend Jess refers to this as, it's either a good story or a good time, which I also quite like as well. So what might this be the unlock to? And sometimes I actually use this one, sometimes I find this one most effective with small decisions. So last Friday afternoon, my friend Megan, she texted me, she was like, Steph, tomorrow night, I'm going to my friend's birthday party, do you want to come with me? And I was like, I don't know, Saturday night, pajamas and Netflix is sounding pretty good. And then I thought, but what if I went to the party? And what if I met the most amazing people in the world? What if that opened this whole other universe of interesting things, new people, new experiences, etc. In fact, in this very space, I've come to so many things in this very space that have been held here. And at the end of towards the end of last year, I came to a startup network event that I really couldn't be bothered to go to because it was like a Thursday evening or something like that. And I met my amazing friend Kate down the front here, who has an amazing startup called Oh Hello. You should check out. It's aged care startup, very cool. And again, we're both lingering at the back a bit like, oh yeah, it's Wednesday night or whatever. And I was like, I like your shoes. And she was like, I like your earrings. We're my friends. So being able to kind of hold, again, that kind of take that perspective of, what might this thing be an unlock to that feels kind of scary, maybe feels like can't really be bothered to go to that thing, but what else might be on the other side of that thing? The other one, sometimes I use this with, just to finish off here, is the messy feelings. So when you're stuck in big feelings, I've been stuck in some really big feelings in the last couple of weeks. When you're feeling those big feelings and it feels really just overwhelming and a bit too much, thinking about, when I get through these feelings, what is on the other side of this? Being able to look back and be like, oh, I remember when that was really hard, but I persevered, I did the things I needed to do, I felt the feelings, I made my way through them and got to the other side. And that kind of freedom that comes with that. And that strength as well that comes from that, and knowing that you can do the hard things. And I think that piece of the unlock is a really cool one, and one I'm really enjoying kind of using as a perspective. All right, so that's looking at things from the future. We've done looking at things from above. We've done looking at them from the future. The final one is looking at it from the outside. Don't you just love this? It's just floating by. It's floating by your window. Like, actually get outside. This is really important. Here is a beautiful photo. Does anyone know where this is? Any Kiwis in the room? Why are you even here? Like, why you've got this? Why here? So this is Ben Lomond in the South Island, just out of Queenstown, one of my absolute favourite spots. And it's kind of like glib and probably a bit cliche now, but there is something really magical about getting out into an expansive physical space. Especially when you're stuck in a decision, you feel like you've had a very narrow view because you're just thinking about this thing, and this may be this binary of, should I do this thing or should I do that thing? Is it A or B, or is it right or wrong, etc. But getting out into physical, big, expansive space literally does change your perspective, because you're like, oh, the world is actually a big place. There is other stuff going on. I don't have to maybe be stuck in this very narrow way of thinking. Literally on Sunday, a friend of mine went for a hike just in the Dandenongs. You don't have to go to the South Island, New Zealand. Highly recommend you do, though, but sometimes that's not always available to us. But being able to just stand on a hill, looking out over the city, looking out over some other mountains or hills or whatever it is, and being like, oh, actually, everything's bigger than just this little small thing that I've found myself really stuck in over the last kind of period of time. So getting outside, highly recommend. It doesn't need to be, elevated, although, your glutes will thank you. But it might be actually getting out to a body of water. I love also looking out to the ocean as well. That's also great. And then sometimes that outside perspective is not outside kind of literally. It's outside of yourself. So my wonderful friend John said this to me at the kind of middle of last year. He lives in Sydney. Whenever he comes down, we kind of catch up and go for a drink. And I'd been boring him with a problem I'd been chewing over for a few months. And in about September last year, he said, Steph, are we still going to be having this bullshit conversation in March? And I was like, oh, no, I'll make a decision. And it's March. It's now March. I changed all the things. I did all the things. It was really hard and messy. But he came for dinner on Tuesday, and I was like, John, we are having a different conversation. So sometimes actually that other perspective comes from someone outside of you. And look, the people who are like, I love you, whatever you choose, and this sounds really hard. Those people are amazing and great, and we need those in their lives. But sometimes we need John to be like, Steph, cut the bullshit, make a decision, move the thing, because we're not having this conversation again. So find your people, know who your people are, know who to go to for the right conversation, I think, as well, is also an important thing. All right, final one. We're doing well. Look for the people doing interesting things. And again, some of these are more relevant to certain sort of problems or sticky things than others. But in 2018, when I was thinking about leaving my very cushy corporate kind of role, I was like, well, I need to find people who are doing these things and see what that existence could look like. So in May 2018, I came and sat in this very room at a Creative Mornings, my first Creative Mornings. Can you guess what was happening on this whiteboard? Jessamy was happening on this whiteboard. And I was like, what is this witchcraft? Because she was doing this incredible graphic recording that I didn't know was a thing, didn't know existed. And it just, again, was this big opening up. And it was this amazing moment of having always felt, and I'd been in a corporate role for kind of 13 and a bit years at that point, having started when I was 18, so I'd kind of grown up in that sort of space, and always felt like a little bit too quirky for corporate, but a bit too corporate for kind of creative. And I kind of came here and I was like, oh, there's people doing these really amazing industries and work and kind of creative pursuits that have got this kind of workiness to them, but also this creativeness to them. This is amazing. And actually just seeing you do your graphic recording, it opened this, again, that was the unlock. That was a wormhole that opened to me. I then went to VisConf, I met Maz, I met my friend John Hibble, there you are, Maz, my friend John Hibble, and met all these other people and people I've been able to collaborate with and do other work with as well. Whilst that's not the work I do, it's very much best left to these experts. But it is work that was kind of adjacent, and it was the thing that showed me kind of another way and was able to just hang out with more interesting people as well. So finding the spaces where people are doing interesting things, and maybe you can't get to those physical spaces because they're somewhere else or you're somewhere else or whatever, but finding those online or finding those through podcasts and things like that is such an amazing way of kind of, again, taking that other perspective and also just seeing what's possible. And again, in some of the work I do in sort of the futures and foresight space, that's a huge part of it, is seeing what's possible. Because a lot of the time we kind of sit in this, oh, well, I can't do those things, or that would be really hard, forgetting to actually look for the people who are already doing them, forgetting to look for the organizations or the small businesses or the big businesses or whoever it is doing the things that then go, oh, they did it. Oh, maybe I can too. And then we can like move forward from that. Okay, so there we go. There are your 8 things. There are your 8 perspectives on big life things. And remembering that sometimes the big life thing isn't a big life thing. Sometimes it's a little tiny thing that we can just kind of hold in our hands, give a little sort of like stroke or a pet to, and be like, hey, thanks. But you can go in my pocket, or you can maybe not exist in the whole of my body as you maybe have been. Now, some of you are sat at the front, towards the front, there's these little fortune tellers on your, on your chairs. I do it with like sort of one hand. All right. So there's love and sex and death and work on the little fortune tellers. So if you're curious about some different perspectives or some other things that are happening in the world on these kind of big chunky topics of love and death and sex and work, if you sort of go through here and open it up, you can have a play and have a little read of those as well. So if you've got one on your chair, or if you didn't have one on your chair, go and find someone who did and go and have a little read of it. Thank you so much. Thank you, team. I am very excited to be here because it feels like I've gone like this. Feels like a full circle kind of serendipitous thing.
It does. Yeah. Thank you so much. Let's hear it for the wonderful Steph Clarke. I can't tell you how incredibly relevant this talk is to me at the moment. I've got one question, and it's such a good one that's come through on Slido. So the rest of you have a think about what questions you might like to ask. But how do you set the scene for yourself to stand in the future and looking back? Meditation, hard liquor, double espresso? How do you get yourself in the future?
Oh, I love this. Well, I don't drink, and I don't drink coffee, so none of those. And I'm a terrible meditator, so definitely not that either. But I like those 3 options, though. For me, it's actually about trying to immerse myself in the future every single day. So that involves thinking about what I'm following, what I'm reading, and actually having a really intentional daily practice about seeing, watching, reading, talking to interesting people who are already existing at the edges. Because the future is happening on the edges. The future's, it's that William Gibson quote of the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So where is it? Yeah, I know, it's a good one, isn't it? So it's finding where is it distributed to and keeping an eye on those different things. And really, and so people are often like, oh, but that must take a lot of time. I'm like, yeah, but it's literally my job. So that is literally what people are paying me to do, which is, what a hack. Okay. But also it means that it's something that you just end up kind of doing every day and having different conversations. And then for me, it's also about where can I every day, or at least kind of every other day, be talking to other people about those things. So whether it's sharing it on LinkedIn, like I'm definitely a LinkedIn girly, so that's where the QR code will take you to. So whether it's sharing it on LinkedIn and sort of in having a different conversation there, or being in different spaces. Like yesterday morning, I was talking at Futures Friends, which is where a bunch of Futures kind of either working people or curious adjacent people share 3 signals, 3 slides, 3 signals in 3 minutes each. So you just go and go all the way through. And so where can you get into those sort of spaces as well, where you just hear different things from different people? So yeah, awesome question. Hopefully that answered it for you.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Steph. Any other questions for Steph?
Go analog. Hello.
Yes.
I have one, I don't know, just kind of an interesting thought that we can riff off.
Yeah.
I was curious, because you mentioned what will you regret more when you're 80,
yes,
as an example. And of course, when you're looking into the future, it's very easy to place yourself in the future. But I guess we as humans are entangled with all our different human relationships, and those things we can't predict. How do you approach that, if that makes sense? Like managing or balancing the different relationships you have in the life with your future goals?
Yeah, that's a really juicy question. Scenario planning, if I'm going to be really nerdy and sort of future-y about it. So sometimes it might be that actually I'm playing out a couple of different scenarios, and actually that's a lot of the work. The work I do for that sort of side, but actually in my life I do that as well. I actually kind of would scenario plan, like if this, then that. Like if I do this option and these people are still in my life, then maybe this is how that plays out. Or this version with these people, or this variation of those people plays out that way. and fast forward to 80 or whatever kind of we're playing with in that, and then just sort of seeing like which one of those kind of fits and sits better, and sometimes that then tells you what decision to make, or where can I kind of mitigate things. I'm like, oh, actually that one feels really unpleasant or uncomfortable, so what action do I need to take now to actually mitigate the kind of the uncomfortableness, or where do I actually have to live with that uncomfortableness, and actually that's the level up. But I think actually doing that sort of like rough scenario planning, and you don't have to sit down and write it down and kind of create a mind map or anything, but even just having that in your mind is a really powerful thing to be like, okay, what are the different factors here and how might they all play out and interact? Because the future doesn't happen in a vacuum, and also the future is plural, so the future is futures. So you imagine a possible futures because there's not one future that's going to play out. Yeah, does that help? Yeah, nice.
I'm actually going to ask a question because I've got a microphone and I can. In the meantime,
the
power, I know. As a recovering control freak,
do we need like a couch for this one?
Help me, doctor. I'm trying to practice a lot more of letting go, actually, of things like if this, then that, and that sort of really kind of labouring decisions. Do you ever practice kind of reckless decision making, roll a dice, paper, scissors, rock? If everything is reversible, are there any scenarios in which you're like, fuck it, let's just see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think like this is one of the things, and sometimes this is my toxic trait. So if anyone was interested in that, you're going to get it. Is making big decisions quite fast. But I think that is because I have that kind of overall thought of like it's all reversible. So you can like, all right, let's give it a go. Let's try it. So I think actually some of these, like yes, you can go down the scenario planning, and maybe some stuff that's really useful because you do need to kind of like overthink it a little bit more. But actually that piece of there's always a way out. Like yes, there may be time, money, effort, tears involved in reversing the thing, but if it can be reversed, let's do that. The other one I quite like, which I think I heard on like a Tim Ferriss podcast or something, I think it's actually like a Stoics kind of approach, is trying on a decision. So you don't tell anyone you've made the decision, but you spend 24 hours as if you have made one, like decision A, and just seeing how it feels. You don't need to do anything, you don't need to act in any way, but you just exist as if you have made that decision. And I really like that, because sometimes that makes you go, oh, well, I didn't like that at all. That's your answer.
Nice. Yeah. I love that, trying on a decision. Any other questions for
Maz?
Oh, yeah, we'll go Maz and then yourself. Yeah.
Okay, so I might ask a bit of a triggering question for everyone. Considering AI and the uncertainty around its coming for our jobs, etc. From a futures perspective for creatives specifically, what should we be thinking about? Who should we be following? Like, how can we, I suppose, make space and integrate all of this stuff without getting panicked or without going, oh, shiny object, and adopting it to destroy ourselves?
Yeah. Oh, good, an existential question, that's what I wanted. Okay, cool. So, people to follow. Amy Webb is incredible. She's an incredible futurist, and she spoke at South by Southwest Austin, big South by, a couple of weeks ago. The talk is up on YouTube. Highly recommend that. And she talks about tech trends. She talks about some of the real bleak stuff that's potential kind of implications of AI and other things, but also some of the really practical stuff as well. Recently, for some clients, I've been doing talks on the skills for the future you don't need. And really, any kind of list that's like, here's the skills for the future you need, they're probably lying to you, they're probably trying to sell you something. Like, you cannot future-proof yourself, because future-proofing suggests there is, do this one thing and then you're good forevermore. Like, that is just not the case. But what we do need to be doing is like looking and listening, and just sort of, and at the moment it is like a kind of fuck about and find out type thing, because nobody knows. And anyone who tells you they know, they do not, they are lying to you. So at the moment it is a bit of a kind of trial and error, because also remembering that in this kind of weird time that we're in, this is the least advanced that any of that technology will ever be. So what we're seeing now is blowing our minds, and it is terrible compared to where it'll be in 1 year, in 5 years, etc. So I realise this doesn't probably give much comfort, because there is no answer. But I think we're looking for certainty in this moment, and it doesn't exist, I'm afraid. And like the World Uncertainty Index is actually getting more uncertain. Like the world is actually just getting more uncertain as well. So that was a cheerful start to a Thursday morning. Thanks, Naz. So I think in answer to your kind of the question, it is following, finding out, listening, and actually just thinking about, okay, where am I most kind of exposed in terms of the work I'm doing, and where else do I add the most value, and how do I kind of double down on some of that stuff? And for some of you, and just to kind of go there, some of you might be like, this is the end of me doing this work, and okay, I have agency in that. And I think this is the important thing about any futures work, is good futures work helps people realize they have agency in the future. So whether that's your future, whether that's your industry's future, your business's future, whatever that kind of the context is for you, but the more you realize you have agency because you can make a decision now when you're looking and doing that scenario planning and thinking about these ways of it playing out, that's where we can kind of, again, make some different decisions about retraining, reskilling, upskilling, cross-skilling, etc. There was
Thanks,
a question
Steph.
down here. Hi.
Morning, Steph. My name is Diletta.
Hi.
Hopefully more optimistic.
Thanks. I'm glad we went to you last. Thanks, Diletta. You're save us all.
We spend a fair bit of time thinking about our potential future. Is there anything to feel particularly excited about that will be shifting our perspective?
Ooh. There's so many things. Like, the young people are cool, aren't they? Like, they're pretty great. I'm also kind of worried about them as well. But what am I most excited about? For me, some of the stuff I'm most excited about is actually some of the changes in like work and some of the futures of work that may play out as well. That at the moment we're in this like weird transitionary phase where work still looks like it did kind of post-industrial revolution, kind of people go to place. And there's some stuff happening obviously that has happened as a result of COVID around hybrid office, that type of stuff, or hybrid remote office. But I think the changing attitudes to work, this generation feeling quite gaslit by the idea of like hustle culture and work, and that if you do these things, you get those things, like that's just not playing out for a lot of people obviously now. So I think what's quite exciting, there's some mess to go through, but actually what work might look like, especially then as a result of AI, of some different kind of work practices, work design, etc. But also some of the overlays of that as well around aging demographics. Like, what does work look like when you're designing it in terms of organisational design, in terms of physical design, in terms of policies and practices? What does that look like when your workforce are maybe 50% of them or so are in their 70s and 80s because people are working longer or unretiring or delaying retirement? So I think, and I'm not sure if that's, exciting to everyone, but I find that quite exciting to think about, actually, this is going to look radically different in the next 10 years, maybe probably even more so in the next 20 years. And I think then there's just some interesting cultural things as well. Like yesterday morning at the event I was at, there was some people talking, one of the women was talking about in South Korea, a lot of women are like actively, there's a huge backlash against the government things that are being put in place to encourage women to have more children, because South Korea's birth rate is the lowest in the world. So there's more people dying every year in South Korea than there are being born. And so, some of the things the women are doing there to actually resist the government trying to make them have more babies and dating and all these other things is amazing. So the government actually put in place a map of showing like where women of childbearing age were in like kind of not like individually, but in terms of like where there are high concentrations. If you're looking for a fertile woman, go there. Like that's I know, wild. So that's not exciting, but some of the kind of, but some of the things that are kind of happening as a result of those kind of changes and the speed that can now happen, I find kind of exciting, sort of not quite in a morbid way, but in a really interesting way of like, this fundamentally changes how we exist and how we interact together as humans in these societies. So there's a couple of things to say. Thanks for ending on a slightly higher note. Somewhat dystopian. Sorry, I had to throw something dark in there.
It's like a real fucked up Tinder.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions on Slido, and then we've probably got time for one or two more if you've got a great one. I love this question. How do you balance what your head says versus what your heart or intuition says when looking at decisions from different perspectives?
Kate and I just looked at each other because we've just been having like the biggest, like messiest conversations recently. Like, we don't. Next question. So, where do I start with this? So, Kate, do you want to take it? Okay. So I think with this one, I try to be a bit more head, and I try and like recognise and notice the heart stuff and name it, because I think that's the really important thing. And there's an amazing book by Brené Brown called Atlas of the Heart. So if you're a bit kind of like feelings illiterate, or you're not kind of used to like naming your feelings, you're like mad, sad, glad, that's all I've got kind of thing. Looking at no particular group in the room, obviously. But that also might be something to think about. And that's something that I find really useful, is being like, oh, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? And whether that's something about I'm just, exploring from a work perspective because it's like a weird future I'm kind of looking at, or whether it's obviously just something in my own personal life. But noticing that, because it is data and it's information and it's useful, but it may be more or less useful than you kind of think it is. So then it's thinking about, okay, now how do I put like the head lens on some of this stuff? So yeah.
Well done. And then last
and then I phone Kate and have a cry afterwards.
Crying is an important part of all decision making, if you ask me.
Again, it's data. Tears are data.
Any last one question for Steph? I've got one more Slido one to round us out, unless anyone's got any question. A very practical one for you, Steph, in terms of futurist content, any podcasts, books, social media accounts, etc. people could follow.
Yeah, I think with this, my advice with this question around, who to follow and stuff, I mean, Amy Webb, great, because that's kind of like good all-round kind of stuff, and like definitely the big things. The thing I would say is find a future that you're most interested in. So whether that's food, or whether that is creativity and photography, whether that is the future of work, whether it is the future of healthcare, the future of a particular type of disease or treatment or whatever. Find like the thing that you're interested in, and then just literally Google future of blah, 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 food, whatever it is, podcast. And find those things, because like I said, it's the stuff that's happening at the edges that's the most interesting. So you can try and do the future of everything, but you'll be there forever. You'll never really get close to the interesting stuff happening at the edges. So for me, it's find the thing you're most interested about and follow that rabbit hole, and then that will probably show you to adjacent rabbit holes and adjacent kind of topics and things like that as well. Because the future of food might actually realise that actually the future of food is actually the future of climate. So you end up then in the climate kind of conversation. So so I think find your topic. Google future of ... include your insert thing here, and see who's doing interesting stuff in that area, because that's where you're going to find the cool things.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Let's hear it for the amazing Steph Clarke.